By now you must surely know that my greatest literary hero is Mark Twain, more formally known as Samuel Langhorne Clemens. I have it on good authority that Mr. Twain will be paying us a visit this spring, quite a feat when you consider that he's been dead for 105 years, but we like to do our very best for our members and friends. We like to go the extra mile, and with God, nothing will be impossible. Clemens entertained the possibility of being a preacher for quite some time. He would have been a good one. So I have trimmed one of his essays down to short sermon length, and I offer it to you on this day when we celebrate the creation and especially the gift of animals. The words are purely Twain's. I have added nothing. It almost makes you think that I shouldn't be paid for this sermon, but I know that you will want to all the same. Twain did not like to speak in churches because he felt people would not feel free to laugh. Please feel free to laugh. Twain speaks. I have been studying the traits and dispositions of the so-called lower animals and contrasting them to the traits and dispositions of man. I find the results humiliating. It obliges me to renounce my allegiance to the Darwinian theory of the ascent of man from the lower animals, since it now seems plain to me that the theory ought to be vacated in favor of a new and truer one, this new and truer one to be named the descent of man from the higher animals. In proceeding toward this unpleasant conclusion, I have not guessed or speculated or conjectured, but I have used what is commonly known as the scientific method. That is to say, I have subjected every postulate that presented itself to the crucial test of actual experiment, and I have adopted it or rejected it according to the result. Thus, I verified and established each step of my course in its turn before advancing to the next. Now, some of my experiments were quite curious. In the course of my reading, I have come across a case where many years ago, some hunters on our Great Plains organized a buffalo hunt for the entertainment of an English earl. They had charming sport. They killed 72 of those great animals and ate part of one of them and left the 71 to rot. Now, in order to determine the difference between an anaconda and an English earl, if any, I caused 7 young calves to be turned into an anaconda's cage. The grateful reptile immediately crushed one of them and swallowed it, then lay back satisfied. It showed no further interest in the calves and no disposition to harm them. I tried this experiment with other anacondas, always with the same result. The fact stood proven that the difference between an earl and an anaconda is that the earl is cruel and the anaconda isn't. And that the earl wantonly destroys what he has no use for, but the anaconda doesn't. This seemed to suggest that the anaconda was not descended from the earl. It also seemed to suggest that the earl was descended from the anaconda and had lost a good deal in the transition. I was aware of many men who have accumulated millions of money that they can ever use and have shown a rabid hunger for more, and have not scrupled to cheat the ignorant and the helpless out of their poor servings in order to partially appease that appetite. I furnished 100 different kinds of wild and tame animals the opportunity to accumulate vast stores of food, but none of them would do it. The squirrels and bees and certain birds made accumulations, but they stopped when they had garnered a winter's supply and could not be persuaded to add to it, either by honesty or by chicanery. Now, in order to bolster up a tottering reputation, the ant proceeded to store up supplies, but I was not deceived. I know the ant. These experiments convinced me that there is this difference between the man and the higher animals. Man is avaricious and miserly. The higher animals are not. Man is the animal that laughs. Indecency, vulgarity, obscenity, these are strictly confined to man. He invented them. Among the higher animals, there is no trace of them. They hide nothing. They are not ashamed. Man is the only animal that is cruel. He is alone in that distinction. He is the only one that inflicts pain for the pleasure of doing it. It is not a trait known to the higher animals. The cat plays with the frightened mouse, but she has this excuse. She does not know that the mouse is suffering. The cat is moderate, inhumanly moderate. She only scares the mouse, she does not hurt it. The cat doesn't dig out the mouse's eyes or tear off its skin or drive splinters under its nails in the fashion of man. When she is done playing with it, she makes a sudden meal of it and puts it out of its misery. Man is the only animal that deals in that atrocity of atrocities, war. He's the only one that gathers his brethren around him and goes forth in cold blood and with calm pulse to exterminate his own kind. He is the only animal that for sordid wages will march out and help to slaughter strangers of his own species who have done him no harm and with whom he has no quarrel. Man is the only animal that robs his helpless fellow of his country, takes possession of it, and drives him out of it or destroys him. Man has done this in every age. There's not a single acre of ground on the globe that is in possession of its rightful owner or that has not been taken away from owner after owner, cycle after cycle, by force and bloodshed. Man is the only patriot. He sets himself apart in his own country under his own flag and sneers at other nations. He keeps uniformed assassins on hand at heavy expense to grab slices of other people's countries and to keep them from grabbing slices of his. And in the in-between campaigns, he washes the blood from his hands and works for the universal brotherhood of man with his mouth. Man is the reasoning animal. In truth, man is incurably foolish. Simple things which the other animals easily learn, he is incapable of learning. Now, among my experiments was this. I got a dog and a cat, and I put them in a cage, and I taught them to be friends. In an hour, I taught them to be friends with a rabbit. Over the course of 2 days, I was able to add a fox, a goose, a squirrel, some doves, and finally a monkey. They lived together in peace. Well, next I caught an Irish Catholic from Tipperary and I put him in a cage. And then I added a Scotch Presbyterian, a Turk from Constantinople, a Methodist from the wilds of Arkansas, a Buddhist from China, and finally a Salvation Army colonel. I stayed away for 2 whole days. When I came back to note the results, there wasn't a specimen left alive. These reasoning animals had disagreed on a theological detail and carried the matter to a higher court. Because, you see, man is also the religious animal. He is the only religious animal. He is the only animal that has the true religion, several of them. He is the only animal that loves his neighbor as himself and cuts his throat if his theology isn't straight. He has made a graveyard of the globe in trying his honest best to smooth his brother's pathway to happiness and heaven. The higher animals have no religion. They're going to be left out. I wonder why. Seems questionable taste. Man is a marvelous curiosity. When he is at his very best, he is a sort of low-grace, nickel-plated angel. At his worst, he is unspeakable, unimaginable. And at the first and at the last and at every point in between, he is a sarcasm. Yet he blandly and in all sincerity calls himself the noblest work of God. Well, now, who found that out? This is the truth I am telling you. This is not a new idea with him. He has talked about it through all the ages and believed it. He has believed it and has found no one in his race to laugh at it. Man is the only animal that blushes or needs to. What a marvel man is. I wish I knew who invented it. Perhaps, this is Fleming speaking, perhaps we should be asking the animals to bless us instead of the other way around. Pray God that you and I might be more like the animals who bless us every day and less like the beasts we have become.